including Stephen Ayers from Champion Township in Trumbull County. He was caught on video, later arrested, and has since pled guilty for his involvement that day. Now, at the time, he reposted the president's call to action and believed
President Trump is still promoting the big lie about the election. How does that make you feel?
It makes me mad because I was hanging on every word he was saying. Everything he was putting out, I was following it. I mean, if I was doing it, hundreds of thousands or millions of other people are doing it, or maybe even still doing it.
And do you still believe the election was stolen?
Not so much now.
Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. Welcome to Veracity. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Now, yesterday, Stephen Ayers, one of the witnesses who participated in the January 6th incident, testified in front of the committee that he did not plan on marching to the Capitol, but when former President Trump inspired everyone through his words, they went forward inside the building. Now, it should be heavily penned that Ayers was originally charged with the obstruction of an official proceedings, 1512C2, which provides a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, and aiding and abetting, entering or remaining in an official building or grounds. However, as soon as Ayers gave this testimony in front of the public about how Trump influenced him, all his charges were removed, and only a simple charge remained of disorderly conduct. This shows how the January 6th committee is luring witnesses to issue false statements against Trump so that they can be removed with heavy charges imposed on them. And this is not the only case where this committee has shown its desperation to defame Trump by adopting such illegal measures. The Gateway Pundit recently shared a leaked email that clearly shows their luring tactics. This email was sent by James Sasso, an investigative counsel of the January 6th committee, to a defendant who pleaded guilty but refused to reveal his name because of fear of retaliation from the government when he gets sentenced. If you looked at the email, it clearly says, "I hope that you're doing well. My name is James Sasso, and I am reaching out about your client. The U.S. House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol believes they have information relevant to its investigation. The Select Committee is examining the facts, circumstances, and causes of January 6th to identify and evaluate lessons learned and to recommend corrective law, policies, procedures, rules, or regulations. As part of that effort, we would like to interview your client, who we understand has accepted responsibility and pleaded guilty. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss scheduling a time for the interview." Now, why do they want to hold an interview with this defendant when he has already pleaded guilty? Well, maybe this defendant can also issue a false statement against Trump, just like Ayers, and get rid of all his charges. However, this anonymous defendant responded by stating, "The committee wants me to apologize for being there. They want me to apologize for speaking out on my opinion on the matter. I just can't do that. That would be a lie. The advantage for doing that is if I can avoid some kind of harsh sentencing, which is coming up. If I don't play ball with them, I fear they will retaliate. There will be a consequence for it. We must not forget that many innocent people have already died because of media propaganda of this committee to give severe punishment to those who were involved in the Capitol incident. To be more specific, Stephen Ayers also walked into the building with his friend Matthew Perna on January 6th. However, on February 26th, Perna died by committing suicide after hearing about the mountainous level of charges imposed against him. Seeing his close friend die is such an unacceptable manner, Ayers was left with no other option than to adjust to the illegal agenda of the committee.
Donald Trump and his legal team, led by Rudy Giuliani, were working on January 6th to delay or halt Congress's counting of electoral votes. The mob attacking and invading the Capitol on that afternoon of January 6th was achieving that result.
These are some of the first images of anyone involved with Jane's Revenge, the shadowy extremist group who has threatened a night of rage if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade.
It shows what appears to be a young woman spray painting the outside of the building, then spraying the surveillance camera. Or found the phrases, "Forced birth is murder," and "not a clinic" on the building.
Just last week, a man approached our care center with an armed machete. As pregnancy care centers in the entire country are constantly facing attacks from pro-abortion activists, This astonishing incident was recently shared by Heidi Matzke, the director of the Alternatives Pregnancy Center in California, who could not believe what she was seeing. However, despite being aware of how pregnancy care centers are inhumanely getting targeted, Senator Elizabeth Warren is now accusing these pregnancy centers of fooling women out of getting abortions, and by calling these pregnancy care centers crisis pregnancy centers. She said this:
in Massachusetts right now, those crisis pregnancy centers that are there to fool people who are looking for pregnancy termination help outnumber true abortion clinics by 3 to 1. We need to shut them down here in Massachusetts, and we need to shut them down all around the country. You should not be able to torture a pregnant person like that.
Now, what kind of example would words like this set in the minds of pro-abortion activists who were already waiting for some stimulus from such Democrats? Well, here's how radical abortion groups Jane's Revenge threatened pregnancy care centers by issuing this open letter. From here forward, any anti-choice group who closes their doors and stops operating will no longer be a target. But until you do, it's open season, and we know where your operations are. The infrastructure of the enslavers will not survive. We will never stop, back down, slow down, or retreat. Now, it should be noted that around 27 pregnancy centers have been damaged since the leak of the Roe v. Wade decision, and at least 63 acts of violence, property destruction, and religious services have been heavily disrupted since that time. However, the FBI have not made any arrests yet and are still investigating the attacks, thus empowering such radical groups. Moreover, such open threats have forced Heidi Matzke to hire 24-hour security at her center.
Reinforce doors and bulletproof our walls. We've had to paint our building with anti-graffiti coating. We've added cameras, armed our staff with pepper spray, and stopped running our mobile clinic because of threats of violence. We have been forced to expend valuable resources for women of up to $150,000 just to protect ourselves. Why? Because we offer free care to women. What we do, though, is worth the risk every community needs.
But the actual question is, will this be enough?
People, come and see. This is the Bank of China at 6 or 7 a.m. People came to line up. They haven't even had breakfast. They came to the bank. It's 10 o'clock now. We are still in line. The bank says they don't have any more numbers and they won't serve us.
After shutting down the entire country by following its infamous and silly zero COVID policy, the Chinese Communist Party is now failing to handle the rising debt crisis. According to China expert and author Gordon Chang, China is going through a systematic debt crisis because of lack of liquidity. The evidence of their crisis became more evident when around 400,000 depositors were unable to withdraw cash from some banks in Hunan province of China. Moreover, this restriction on withdrawing cash happened from the People's Bank of China, which is the central bank of the country. And in the rural regions of the country, people have not been able to withdraw cash since April. This shows that the CCP's unauthorized acts of expanding its territory by providing enormous loans to countries like Sri Lanka is now dragging China into record-breaking debt. Chang has this to say: the Chinese Communist Party right now has no economic answer. The country as a whole is in too much debt. And so this is an issue going forward. It has been masked because the Communist Party has been able to obtain money from the outside. It's been masked because they have incurred debt. But now they are running out of room for what to do. And when the citizens tried to protest in front of the People's Bank of China, the police, who were acting under the CCP's directions, started beating the protesters for executing their fundamental right.
You could see hundreds of local security personnel, many plainclothes agents charging towards this crowd, forcibly removing everyone, including the elderly and children. Anyone who resisted got kicked and punched, some sustaining injuries and got sent to local hospitals. This, of course, is also happening in a very sensitive year politically, as Chinese Supreme Leader Xi Jinping is expected to assume a precedent-breaking third term later this year, and his whole legitimacy reputation very much built on this idea of the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. So this kind of incident's huge embarrassment for him for sure.
Chang said this: This is the typical playbook of the Communist Party: to intimidate, to use force. The party line is that this money is not yours, it's our money, and we are going to do what we want with it.
Hundreds of thousands of people from ethnic minorities, including the Uyghur community, are being forced by the Chinese authorities to pick cotton in the far western region of Xinjiang.
We're turned back at checkpoints.
We'll pay.
Stopped from filming.
We'll pay.
Questioned and followed.
Behind is also following us.
This is one site we're trying to get to, a giant re-education camp. But more recently, something else has been built next door, a textile factory. Days after its completion, a large group of people can be seen being moved between the camp and the factory.
After years of slavery and human rights violations, the Uyghur people in the Xinjiang region of China are finally getting relief since the passing of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, UFLPA. As the Uyghur people were forced to produce an enormous amount of cotton in the region, this act banned all American companies from importing products from the Xinjiang region to protect their rights. Thankfully, since the act came into effect on June 21st, the loss in demand for the products have now forced the government of China to buy millions of tons of its own cotton to be reserved for an emergency. However, as effective as this act seems, there are certain loopholes in this law that could still force Uyghur people into acts of slavery. Because the UFLPA only bans the United States from importing cotton products from the Xinjiang region of China, this gives CCP an opportunity to supply the same products from different regions of the country. So instead of the Xinjiang region, CCP can shift the base of supply to the neighboring region. Furthermore, the 2020 report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute revealed that the CCP was selling Uyghur slaves online in different factories across China.
China has sent massive numbers of Uyghurs to China proper to work as slaves.
This propaganda video from February says 179 migrant workers are leaving Xinjiang for Fujian in China's east. Reports suggest that the workers are paid, but have no choice about going to the factories.
Surprisingly, in the same year, around 82 multinational companies, including Nike, sourced products from factories where slaves were already working. And as around 80% of solar panels in America come from China, this further makes it difficult for the US to stop CCP from exploiting Uyghur people. According to researcher Ruth Ingram, if the Western countries continue with their demand for cotton from the Xinjiang region, then UFLPA will have a minor impact on the China supply chain. Ingram said this: if Canada, Europe, and other countries involved in procurement refuse to pull their weight, goods will simply be redirected, and the new law will have little impact on the ground. Now, lastly, President Biden's love for China was again witnessed after he waved off tariffs on solar panels coming from Southeast Asian nations, because it is in this region where most solar panels are manufactured by the CCP, thus giving them the perfect opportunity to bypass the UFLPA law. I'd like to thank you all for spending time with me. And if you haven't yet, I want you to watch this short documentary right up here on transhumanism, and then join me tomorrow where we'll discuss more truths happening in America. Have a good evening, and I'll see you next time.